When Jamie Grudger was finally apprehended, he didn't even have a proper serial killer name. He was known simply as the Coldchester Killer. His murders, while certainly grisly, weren't novel enough to warrant a snappy nickname. Yet when he was given a few seconds to speak to the press from the courthouse steps, Jamie spread wide his arms, closed his eyes, and declared himself a butterfly, which will soon flutter behind all the colors of the world. Granted, only a few people close to the case knew why he chose the name, but it made for good TV and supplied the killer with a much-needed moniker. Jamie held the belief, more of a conviction really, that he was building a cocoon of souls and skin with each murder he committed. Through numerous police interrogations and psychological evaluations, he swore he would soon emerge from his larval imperfections to become a butterfly of sweetest skin and spirit. Harry Mills was the detective who brought the butterfly to ground, discovering the murderer in a dimly lit attic of an abandoned house. The killer sat in the weak glow of a single shrinking candle, whispering to his latest victim, staring blankly into the darkness that pulsed and prowled with each gasp of the dying light. Harry overheard only a snippet of the one-way conversation, but it had the effect of cracking his confidence in Newtonian oaths against a goblin universe of doubtful solidity and infinite jest. Jamie didn't put up a fight when Harry handcuffed him and read him his rights. Nor did he protest when his head was smacked against the side of the unmarked police car when they put him in. He just smiled politely, an automated response to the low and larval. It was just after midnight when Harry responded to the 911 call originating from the Nothman Hills Sanitarium, the current repository for a certain cocoon-making madman. What the frantic caller described was impossible, if not solid grounds for being locked up in the loony bin themselves. But the custodian's account stoked cold fires within the breast of the seasoned and celebrated detective. He had to see it to believe it, or rather, to deny it. When Harry and several other officers arrived at the sanitarium, they felt the awful draw of unbidden powers, like the waters of a dark sea frothing at the emergence of something titan and terrible. A flood of staff members poured into the parking lot, ranting and screaming about dreadful, wholly unbelievable things. One officer was instructed to remain behind to manage the crowd, for which he appeared grateful. The rest continued inside, weapons drawn, to seek out the cause of the chaos. The men immediately observed a palpable absence to the sanitarium's atmosphere, as if it had been abandoned to the swirling dust of some vaguely remembered tragedy. Every room and corridor promised the unknown, wherein the laws of nature bowed and scraped to nursery boogies and died at the behest of nameless kings and queens. Every man knew better than to fix his confidence to the solid universe. The group jointly winced when the lights began to flutter and fade, struggling like a moth caught in the mouth of a snake, its frantic wings slowly sounding out the rhythm of its death. Yet they continued into the vanishing spaces ahead, each man wordlessly pleading with himself to flee and never look back. The door to the butterfly's room stood ajar, an unwholesome noise leaking into the hallway, a patient but determined, sloughing noise, like sodden newspapers tossed to the floor. Yet it was the gentle moaning that froze the men to the spot, their inner voices screaming madly. The detective gently opened the door and stepped into the room. There, in the middle of the floor, churned and bubbled a congealing mass of men and women, all of them outlining what could only be described as a cocoon. While the object was discernible as a mass of interconnected, riven bodies, all of them the victims of the inimitable butterfly. Its overall whole projected a macabre lack of distinction, appearing at once as a contiguous expanse of gelling flesh. As the whole became ever more apparent for its parts, a hidden truth came into view. What the autopsies and other careful examinations of the butterfly's victims had failed to reveal, leading to the assumption of his rather uninspired approach to serial killing, was that Jamie Grudger had indeed applied a singular eye to his method of murder. Each dismemberment, every layer of flayed skin, all of it, was performed to create a jigsaw of human parts that would eventually, in accordance with the laws of Stygian physics, be reunited into an instrument of final transformation. That very device now throbbed and babbled at the center of a room reserved for madmen. Largely translucent, the fully joined cocoon yielded a view of its contents. Jamie stared at the policeman through liquid eyes, articulating a cluster of bleeding tubers into what might have been a smile. Harry reflected upon the words he overheard the killer once whisper to a corpse. "Don't fret, still one. For when I've grown into the glories of that savage heaven, they will come to marvel at me. I will feast upon them as they gawk, making me strong enough to complete the final journey into undying darkness." The mass of liquefied human ruin began to shudder as the creature within thrashed about. At first, the embryonic horror only splashed its body against the lustrous skin of its container, but within moments, it began to rip free. Its final journey was about to begin.